How is it going, everybody? This is Sean Barnes. I want to welcome you to episode 59 of The Way of the Wolf. On the show today, I'm going to be talking to you about feedback, and more specifically, the importance of providing feedback, how to give feedback, why and when do you give feedback. We're going to talk about a number of these different things. And this is something that I've kind of been thinking about quite a bit in recent weeks. This all started when I was providing some feedback to a friend and colleague of mine about some things that he had done in the past, and feedback that I had received about some of that work from some of the people who had worked with him on that. And it was interesting as the conversation unfolded. He was appreciative of the feedback, but his initial response was to kind of go on the defensive a little bit. And admittedly, that's something that I have struggled with as well. We don't always like hearing feedback, but it is important for us to receive that feedback so that we can learn, so that we can grow and get better. So today on the show, I want to talk through kind of 5 tips on the best way to give or share feedback, in my opinion. First and foremost, I want you to check your motives. Make sure that you are doing this for the right reasons. Do you genuinely want to help this individual or the team get better? Or are you just in this negative, salty, sour state and just want to rip into somebody? I can assure you, if it's the latter, you might as well just save your breath. It's not going to be received well. The conversation isn't going to go over well. But you have to have an element of self-awareness to know why you're coming to the conversation. Next one is going to be timeliness, making sure that you're not waiting 6 months to provide the feedback to somebody after an event or an incident or something occurred. Try to do it as close to that event as possible. Now, there is a little bit of a balance here. If you do it too close to the event, especially if it was something bad and emotions were running high, the feedback might not be received well. You need to be able to assess and determine, is this person in the correct emotional state to receive the feedback? The next thing I want to talk about is going to be consistency. This is something that I've seen people struggle with in life. If there is a recurring pattern or a theme of issues or problems or things that occur, many times people will just deal with it. They'll just sit back, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. But what happens is over time, that not a big deal, not a big deal, not a big deal starts adding up and becoming more of a burden and weighing more and more heavily on you. This is something that admittedly I struggled with early on, especially in my career, where I would have members of my team who weren't doing their job, weren't doing the things that they were supposed to be doing, and I would just do it. I would say, yeah, it's not a big deal. I'll take care of it. Well, over time, that built up, and then one day I just exploded. And there's only been 3 times in my career where I've exploded on my team or people on my team. And each time I had to reflect afterwards and think, okay, why did that happen? And I realized there have to be levels of escalation, which kind of feeds into the consistency. You have a conversation the first or second time an incident or an event occurs, and it doesn't have to be some crazy over-the-top conversation. It can be something as simple as, hey, what's going on here? I noticed this is out of the norm, or this isn't really the way we do things. What happened? Talk me through it. When you take that approach, it gives you the opportunity to share your perspective and make sure the other person hears the feedback. Now, it's very possible that it just goes in one ear and out the other. which is why consistency is key. You then have that next conversation if an event occurs or a situation occurs and say, hey, like we talked about this in the past. What's going on? Help me understand. And so if you're able to give consistent feedback over time, you create an environment where the person receiving the feedback knows what's going on. If they continue to exhibit those patterns or behaviors, then you know, hey, you've got a bigger issue that you need to contend with, which is probably a topic for another conversation, but at least you're making the effort to be consistent throughout. Next is going to be being specific. This is something that I would highly encourage. If there is an issue or a problem that's weighing heavily on you, write it down. Take the time, write it down, put down bullets or whatever formatting works best for you to be able to process through that information and prepare for the conversation. But you don't want to come into a conversation and talk about a topic and then an hour or 2 hours later say, man, I completely forgot to cover this. Be specific. Make sure that you go into any conversation with intentionality and that you know exactly what you're going to be talking about. The last thing that I want to touch on is being open to feedback in return. It is quite possible that a person or a team is acting a certain way towards you because of something that you are doing. You may not even realize that you're doing it, but what you don't want to occur is to sit down, have a conversation with somebody, and then them provide feedback back to you saying, okay, well, this is where my head is at and this is what's going on. And these behaviors that you're exhibiting are what is prompting me to do this. You don't want to then lock up and then get defensive. So you have to be prepared and open and willing to receive feedback in return. I want to make a special note on this. When it comes to receiving feedback, that can be tricky because a lot of times when you're receiving feedback, you're blindsided by it. So it's difficult to be prepared and in a calm and collected state to receive feedback because you never know when you're going to receive that feedback. Sometimes you do if it's an annual performance review or something like that, but you don't always know. So be prepared. Make sure that you are comfortable in receiving feedback or are at least able to receive feedback in a calm and collected manner so that you can process it on your own. I also want to touch on what's referred to as the compliment sandwich when receiving feedback. This is something that I think occurs. People provide guidance on how to give feedback, especially people that are not comfortable with giving feedback. And they'll say, hey, come in, do a compliment sandwich. What that means is you say something good, you talk about the challenge or the issue or the problem, and then you end the conversation with something good. I think this is a decent approach to providing feedback. However, in my experience, the problem that inevitably occurs is when you have a conversation with somebody and you approach it with this manner, that they will tend to focus on either the first good thing that you said, or only focus on the bad thing, or focus on that last good thing that you said. That can be a problem because inevitably the messaging that you're trying to convey kind of gets lost. And I'm not going to say it's wasted effort. It is probably a good approach to start with if you're not comfortable giving feedback, but I would highly encourage you to stay focused on the topic at hand. Instead of dealing with this compliment sandwich type situation or thing, try to focus on the topic at hand, what you want to cover, what you want to discuss. And the key here is going to be kindness and candor. approach the conversation from a place of caring and wanting to help or better understand. Those are going to be the keys. Something that I like to do with some of the people that I coach is issue homework from time to time. And this will be the first time that I'm going to do this on the podcast. I would like to challenge all of you listening to think about maybe someone in your life that you've had some issues with or challenges with, and maybe you've been afraid to share that feedback with them. It can be friends, family, coworkers, a boss, an employee, doesn't really matter. But I would challenge all of you to think about that individual, write down your thoughts, and consider having a conversation with them, providing that feedback to them. I will even go so far as to say, if any of you want to bounce ideas off of me, please feel free to contact me, Sean@thewayofthewolf.com. I would be happy to have a conversation with you and then maybe provide some guidance or just bounce ideas off of one another. Speaking of feedback, I've been receiving some more reviews and comments on the show. I can't thank all of you enough. I have quite a few 5-star reviews and people that have left comments. I have one 1-star review, which I think I'll just chalk up to a hater last year. They didn't leave any comments. It was just a 1-star review. I'm not going to make everybody happy. That's okay. Please feel free to leave comments, leave reviews on the show. I truly appreciate it. I want this show to be better. I want to make sure that I'm adding value to all of you that are listening and watching the show. That's all I got for the day. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and y'all have a good one.